I pulled up outside our house in the suburbs of Portland late that night, the engine of my Accord still ticking as it cooled in the October air. The envelope in my jacket pocket felt heavier than paper should, heavier than anything I'd carried in months. 3 months of grinding had finally paid off. 3 months of late nights at Riverside Technologies, skipped meals hunched over spreadsheets, taking on projects no one else wanted to touch. The kind of work that aged you faster than it should. But it had been worth it. The raise was approved, 15%, more than I'd hoped for. The bonus cleared, a number that made my hands shake when I first saw it in the company portal. I had plans. Big ones. Plans that involved Whitney's face lighting up the way it used to, back when we first got married 4 years ago in that little chapel outside Seattle. The house stood before me, a modest 2-story we'd bought together during better times. I remembered the day we'd signed the papers, how she'd squeezed my hand in the realtor's office, her eyes bright with possibility. Now, as I approached the front door, something felt different. Off. I walked inside expecting the usual noise. A TV murmuring in the background, probably some reality show Whitney had gotten hooked on. Music from her phone. She always played that indie folk playlist while cooking. The smell of dinner, even if it was just takeout. Something. Anything. Instead, the place felt hollow, like a hotel room after checkout. The air itself seemed thinner, colder. The lights were on, but they illuminated an emptiness that made my chest tighten. Whitney was in the dining area, standing by the large window that overlooked our small backyard. Her arms were folded across her chest, and she was staring at the dark reflection of herself in the glass. The street lamp outside cast long shadows across her face. She didn't turn when I came in, didn't acknowledge the sound of my keys hitting the table by the door. "Hey," I said carefully, my voice sounding too loud in the silence. "Everything okay?" She turned slowly, as if the movement required tremendous effort. Her face told me everything before her mouth did. That distant, rehearsed calm people, where when they've already made a decision and are just waiting to deliver it. I'd seen that look before, on colleagues who were about to quit, on friends who were ending relationships, on my own father when he told my mother he was leaving. "We need to talk, Stephen," she said. Those 4 words. They always mean the same thing. I set my briefcase down carefully and sat on the couch we'd picked out at that furniture store in downtown Portland. The brown leather suddenly felt foreign beneath me. "Go on." She inhaled deeply, crossed her arms tighter across her body, like she was protecting herself from something. "I don't think this marriage is working anymore. I think we need time apart. I need space to figure things out. Apart. Not divorce. They never say divorce at first. They test the waters with softer words, gentler exits." I nodded once, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. "Why?" She looked away, toward the window again, toward her own reflection. "I've been unhappy for a while, Stephen. Really unhappy. I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to tell you without hurting you." "A while," I repeated, my voice hollow. "How long is a while?" "Weeks," she said. "Maybe longer." She couldn't pinpoint exactly when it started. It had been gradual, she claimed. A slow erosion of feelings, of connection, of whatever it was that had once held us together. I sat there, listening to her words, but my mind drifted backward. To a time when none of this would have been imaginable. To the version of us that had existed before everything crumbled. We'd met 6 years ago at a friend's barbecue in Seattle. I was 26, working my first real job out of college at a small tech startup. She was 24, finishing her degree in graphic design at the University of Washington. I remember watching her laugh at something someone said, the way her whole face lit up, the way she threw her head back without any self-consciousness. She was magnetic. I'd worked up the courage to talk to her, expecting to fumble my words or say something stupid. Instead, we'd talked for 3 hours straight. About everything and nothing. About her dreams of opening her own design studio someday. About my hopes of building something meaningful in tech. About the books we loved, the places we wanted to travel, the kind of lives we wanted to build. When she smiled at me that night, really smiled, I felt something shift in my chest. Like a door opening to a room I didn't know existed. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant in Capitol Hill. I'd been so nervous I'd arrived 20 minutes early and walked around the block 4 times before going in. She showed up in a blue sundress that made her eyes look impossibly bright, and I forgot every word of the speech I'd prepared. We talked until the restaurant closed. Then we walked through the streets of Seattle, past Pike Place Market, down to the waterfront where the ferries came and went in the darkness. She told me about her childhood in Eugene, about growing up with two older brothers who'd taught her to be tough. I told her about my parents' divorce, about learning to be self-reliant too young. The next 2 years were the happiest of my life. We fell into each other completely. Weekend trips to the Oregon coast where we'd walk on the beach for hours. Late nights in her apartment where she'd sketch designs while I worked on code, both of us content in comfortable silence. Holidays with her family, where her mother treated me like a son, and her father taught me to fish on their property outside Eugene. I loved her in the way you love someone when you're young and haven't been broken yet. Completely. Without reservation. With the kind of faith that believes love can conquer anything if you just try hard enough. I proposed on the anniversary of the day we met, back at that same waterfront in Seattle. I'd saved for months to buy the ring. A simple diamond on a white gold band, nothing extravagant but chosen with care. When I got down on one knee, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. She'd cried, said yes before I could even finish the question. We stayed on that waterfront until dawn, making plans, dreaming about our future together. The wedding was small, intimate. 50 people in a chapel outside Seattle, surrounded by Douglas firs and mountains. She wore a simple white dress and looked more beautiful than I'd ever seen her. When we said our vows, I meant every single word. For better or for worse. In sickness and in health. Until death do us part. I thought we'd meant the same thing. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, but a good one. We moved to Portland for my job at Riverside Technologies. Found this house, made it ours. She got freelance design work, started building a client base. We hosted dinner parties, went hiking on weekends, talked about having kids someday. I worked hard because I wanted to give her everything. The life she deserved. Security. Stability. The freedom to pursue her passions without worrying about money. When she mentioned wanting a nicer car, I made a mental note. When she talked about traveling to Italy someday, I started a savings account. When she said she was proud of me, I felt 10 feet tall. I loved her in the way you love someone when they're your whole world. When their happiness is more important than your own. When you'd work yourself to exhaustion just to see them smile. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I loved her more than she loved me. Maybe I was building a future she never really wanted. Or maybe I just loved the idea of her more than the reality of who she actually was. Stephen? Whitney's voice pulled me back to the present. Did you hear what I said? I blinked, refocusing on her face. The face I'd loved for 6 years. The face that was now telling me it was over. I sat there, processing her words while my mind spun through the last few months. While I'd been staying late at Riverside Technologies, working overtime on the Jennings account, dreaming about the surprise I had planned, the surprise that was supposed to make everything better, she'd already been planning her exit. Mapping out her escape while I was mapping out our future. The irony wasn't lost on me. I asked the question I already knew the answer to, the question every man in my position asks, even though he knows it will only bring pain. Is there someone else? Her hesitation lasted maybe half a second. But in relationships, half a second is an eternity. It's the pause that confirms everything, the silence that speaks louder than any confession. It's complicated, she finally said, and I almost laughed at the cliché of it. Uncomplicate it for me, Whitney. She shifted her weight, uncomfortable now, the rehearsed calm beginning to crack. It's Derek. My ex, Derek Holloway. You remember him. Of course I remembered him. The ex she'd sworn was ancient history when we first started dating. The one she'd said she barely spoke to anymore. The one she'd claimed was just a footnote in her past. I'd believed her because I'd wanted to. Because believing her was easier than questioning. He's in trouble, Stephen. His business collapsed. That marketing firm he started in Vancouver, it went under. He lost everything. His house, his car, his savings. He doesn't have anyone else. His family doesn't talk to him, and he's struggling. Really struggling. I processed this slowly, each word landing like a stone. So, I said, my voice carefully controlled, you're leaving me to help him? She bristled immediately, defensive. That's not fair. You're making it sound worse than it is. You're right, I said. That wasn't fair. Try again. Explain it to me in a way that makes sense. She took a breath, gathering herself. You're stable, Stephen. You're successful. You have your job at Riverside. Your career is going somewhere. You have friends, family. You'll be fine. You're the kind of person who always lands on his feet. She paused. Derek's not. He needs support. Real support. Someone who understands him. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. Not angry. Not sad. Just quiet. I reached into my pocket and felt the envelope. The thick, expensive paper crinkled slightly under my fingers. Inside was a receipt from Prestige Motors, a set of keys, and paperwork with her name, Whitney Claire Morrison, printed neatly at the top. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. was supposed to be special. I was going to take her to breakfast at that cafe she loved, the one on Hawthorne Boulevard with the outdoor seating and the lavender lattes. Then we'd drive to the dealership where a white Tesla Model Y, the exact model she'd been talking about for a year, the one she'd saved photos of on her phone, would be waiting with a giant red bow on the hood. I'd worked with Gerald, the sales manager, for weeks to get everything perfect. The right color, the right trim package, the right moment. It was going to be a symbol of everything I'd been working toward: stability, security, the ability to give her the life she deserved. Instead, I set the envelope back where it was, deep in my pocket. "Okay," I said simply. She blinked, clearly thrown by my lack of reaction. "Okay, that's all you're going to say." I stood up and walked to the desk in the corner, my desk, where I paid our bills and managed our finances. I grabbed a notepad and wrote down a name and number in careful block letters. Amanda Rodriguez, Clearwater Legal Associates, followed by her direct office line. "If you want to formalize this," I said, tearing off the page and setting it on the coffee table between us, "call my lawyer Monday morning. I won't fight you. I won't contest anything. We can split things fairly and be done with it." Whitney stared at me like I'd physically slapped her. "That's it? You're not even going to try? You're not going to fight for us?" I looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her. The woman I'd married 4 years ago in Seattle, the woman who'd promised to be my partner through everything. "You just told me another man matters more than I do. You just told me you're choosing his crisis over our marriage. What exactly am I supposed to fix, Whitney? How do I compete with someone else's problems being more important than our entire life together?" She tried to argue, tried to frame it as compassion, as loyalty, as doing the right thing for someone in need. She painted herself as a good person making a hard choice, as someone who couldn't just abandon Derek when he was at his lowest point. "This isn't about not loving you," she insisted. "It's about being human, about not turning my back on someone who needs help." I cut her off. "Pack your things." "What? If you're serious about this, if you're actually leaving, then don't be here when I get back. Get your essentials tonight. We can figure out the rest through lawyers." "Stephen, you can't just—" "I can," I said quietly. "And I am." I grabbed my keys from the table and left without another word. The cold October air hit my face as I walked to my car, and I realized my hands were shaking. Not from anger, not from sadness, from something else entirely. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of freedom. I drove for hours with no destination, through downtown Portland, past Powell's Books where we'd spent lazy Sunday afternoons, along the Willamette River where we'd watched fireworks on the 4th of July, through neighborhoods I'd never explored, the city lights blurring past my windows like tears I refused to shed. The weight of the envelope in my pocket reminded me of how badly I'd misjudged my own life. How I'd been building a future while she'd been planning an exit. How I'd mistaken her silence for contentment when it was really just the quiet before abandonment. When I returned home around 3 in the morning, half her wardrobe was gone from our closet. The empty hangers looked like the skeleton of something that had died. Her toiletries were missing from the bathroom. The photos of us together, the ones from our wedding, from our honeymoon in Hawaii, from happier times, had been turned face down on her nightstand. A note sat on the kitchen counter, written in her looping handwriting on a page torn from her journal. "I'm staying with Derek temporarily while we figure this out. I hope you can understand. I'll be in touch. W." I read it twice, then crumpled it up and threw it in the trash can. Then I pulled it out and read it one more time, looking for something I couldn't name. An apology, maybe. A hint of regret. A sign that she understood what she was destroying. There was nothing. I called Prestige Motors at 8 a.m. when they opened and asked for Gerald. "I need to cancel an order," I said, my voice steady despite the exhaustion. "The Tesla?" Gerald asked, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. "But Stephen, it's all ready. We've got it detailed, the paperwork's done, the financing is approved." "I know. Cancel it anyway." "Are you sure? There might be fees." "I'm sure. Send me whatever cancellation paperwork you need. Some gifts don't deserve to be given." The next morning, a Saturday, the silence didn't crush me the way I expected it to. It surprised me instead, felt almost peaceful. I made coffee in our French press, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the business card Amanda Rodriguez had given me months ago when I'd helped her with a tech issue at a networking event. I'd never imagined I'd actually need a divorce lawyer. My phone buzzed against the wood surface. A text from Whitney. I hope you understand why I had to do this. It's not about not loving you. Please don't hate me. I stared at the message for a full minute, then deleted it without responding. What was there to say? That I understood? I didn't. That I forgave her? I couldn't. That everything was fine? It wasn't. Later that afternoon, my neighbor stopped by. Helen Winters, a retired teacher who lived next door with her husband of 40 years. She'd seen us grow from newlyweds to whatever we'd become, had brought us cookies when we first moved in, had watered our plants when we traveled. Stephen, she said carefully when I answered the door, I saw the suitcases yesterday, and I thought you should know. She hesitated, uncomfortable. I've seen a man picking Whitney up during lunch hours. For weeks now. Different cars, a blue pickup truck mostly, sometimes a gray sedan. Same destination every time. My stomach dropped. How long? 6 weeks, maybe more. I didn't want to say anything. I thought maybe it was just a friend or a co-worker. But after yesterday, she touched my arm gently. I'm sorry, honey. That was when the timeline snapped into focus with brutal clarity. 6 weeks ago, I'd been working on the Morrison project at Riverside, the one that required weekend hours and late nights. 6 weeks ago, Whitney had suddenly become supportive of my overtime, encouraging me to focus on work, telling me not to worry about her. She hadn't been supporting my career. She'd been creating space for Derek. I called Amanda Rodriguez immediately. Then I called Connor Hayes, an old friend from college I hadn't seen in months. We met at a sports bar in Northeast Portland, and I told him everything over beers I barely tasted. You dodged a bullet, Connor said flatly. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you did. Life slowly got quieter and clearer. I started working out again, something I'd neglected during the marriage. Went back to playing basketball on Thursday nights with guys from Riverside. Rediscovered hobbies I'd abandoned, reading, hiking the trails around Mount Hood, actually cooking instead of ordering takeout. The house felt different. Emptier, yes, but also more mine. I rearranged furniture, painted the guest room, replaced the shower curtain Whitney had chosen. Small acts of reclamation. 2 days after she left, a stranger called my cell phone. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. Is this Stephen Morrison? A man's voice asked. Who's asking? My name's Trevor Nash. I used to work with Derek Holloway at his marketing firm in Vancouver. I heard through mutual friends that your wife recently left you for him. Is that true? I felt my jaw tighten. Why are you calling me? Because you deserve to know the truth. He paused. Derek isn't broke. His business didn't fail. I worked there until last month. The company's doing fine. He's got 6 employees and just signed a major contract with a hotel chain. He bought a new Ford F-150 3 weeks ago. Paid cash. The words didn't immediately make sense. That's not, she said he lost everything. Trevor laughed without humor. Derek's a con artist. Always has been. He tells sob stories to get what he wants. The failed business routine is his favorite. He used it on his last girlfriend too, borrowed 20 grand from her to save the company, then ghosted her when she started asking questions. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Safeway, processing what I'd just learned. Whitney hadn't left me to save someone. She'd left me for a story she wanted to believe. For a fantasy where she was the hero rescuing the broken man. The reality was so much uglier. By the time Whitney called again 3 weeks later, it didn't matter anymore. I was in my kitchen making pasta sauce from scratch, something I'd learned from a YouTube channel I'd discovered during one of my sleepless nights, when her name appeared on my phone screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Stephen. Her voice was shaking, the confidence completely gone. We need to talk. We did talk, I said calmly, stirring the sauce. 3 weeks ago. You made your decision. I respected it. It's not what I thought it would be. Derek isn't. Things aren't what he said they were. I think I made a mistake. I added basil to the pot, watching the leaves wilt in the heat. What kind of mistake? Can I come over? Can we talk in person? No. Stephen, please. I know I hurt you, but I need. When she asked if she could come home, I said no again. Firmly. Finally. Where are you staying? I asked, not because I cared but because the silence felt too heavy. With Derek still. But it's complicated. His place is smaller than I thought. And there are things he didn't tell me. Money things. Business things. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. Figure it out, I said. You're an adult. You made a choice. Now you have to live with it. How can you be so cold? I'm not cold, Whitney. I'm consistent. You wanted space to figure things out. I'm giving you that space. All of it. She cried. The sound of it used to break me. Now it just felt like background noise, like rain against windows. Can we at least meet for coffee? She tried. Just to talk. No. If you need to discuss the divorce, call Amanda Rodriguez. That's what lawyers are for. I hung up before she could respond. The weeks that followed brought more calls. Each one more frantic than the last. More desperate. She left voicemails I didn't listen to, sent texts I didn't read past the first line. Friends we'd shared, people I'd thought were my friends too, reached out on her behalf. She's really struggling, said Natalie Young, Whitney's college roommate. Can't you just talk to her? She chose to struggle, I replied. I would have chosen differently. Eventually, 6 weeks after she'd left, Whitney called from an unknown number. I answered by accident, thinking it was a client. Stephen, please don't hang up. Her voice was raw, exhausted. I need to tell you the truth. All of it. I leaned back in my office chair at Riverside Technologies, where I'd just finished a successful pitch meeting. I'm listening. The story came out in broken pieces. Derek hadn't been broke. His business was fine. But he'd convinced her to lend him money anyway. Her savings, the emergency fund she'd kept in a separate account, even money she'd borrowed from her parents by lying about what it was for. $27,000. Gone. He'd used it for gambling debts, she eventually discovered. The truck Trevor mentioned? Bought with her money. The struggling business was just a front. When she confronted him, he'd kicked her out. Changed the locks. Blocked her number. Now she was staying in a budget motel off Highway 26, drowning in debt, abandoned by Derek and too ashamed to tell her parents the truth. Most of our mutual friends had stopped answering her calls, tired of the drama. I just need somewhere safe, she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. Just for a little while. Just until I can get back on my feet. Please, Stephen. I have nowhere else to go. I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the woman I'd married, about the vows we'd taken, about the life we'd tried to build. Then I thought about the envelope in my pocket that night. About the Tesla that would never be given. About the hours I'd worked while she'd been planning her exit. About the lies and the betrayal and the fundamental disrespect of it all. No, I said. Why are you being so cruel? I made a mistake. People make mistakes. I'm not being cruel, I replied quietly. I'm being consistent. You made choices. I respected them. I didn't beg. I didn't manipulate. I didn't try to convince you to stay. Now you have to live with those choices. That's not cruelty. That's consequence. But I love you. I still love you. You love the idea of stability. You love having a safety net. But you didn't love me enough to stay when things were good. So why would I believe you love me now that things are bad? She cried harder. She pleaded. She apologized with words that might have meant something 2 months ago, but now just sounded empty. But peace had already settled into my home. Into my life. Clean counters. Quiet nights. No chaos. No walking on eggshells. No wondering when the next emotional storm would hit. And I wasn't about to invite it back. Goodbye, Whitney, I said. Stephen, wait. I hung up and blocked the number. The weeks after that final conversation passed quietly. No more surprise visits because she didn't know my new door code. I'd changed it the day after she left. No messages sent through friends or family because I'd made it clear I wouldn't respond. No missed calls waiting when I woke up because every number she tried from was immediately blocked. It was as if a door had finally closed and locked and been sealed with concrete for good measure. Winter settled into Portland slowly that year. Mornings grew colder, darker. I developed routines that were mine alone. Gym at 6 a.m. before work, where I'd started working with a trainer named Russell, who pushed me harder than I'd ever pushed myself. Coffee after at a local shop on Burnside, where the barista named Jade started having my order ready before I walked in. Long walks on Sunday evenings with no destination in mind, just movement for the sake of moving. The house stopped feeling like a reminder of what I'd lost and started feeling like a place I'd reclaimed. I adopted a dog from the Oregon Humane Society, a 3-year-old Labrador mix named Cooper who'd been returned twice by previous owners. We understood each other, Cooper and I. We'd both been abandoned by people who'd promised to stay. One afternoon in late November, while sorting through old paperwork in the basement, I found the envelope again. The one that had once held plans for a future that never came. The receipt from Prestige Motors, the key fob that had never been presented, the registration with Whitney's name that had been canceled. I didn't feel anger looking at it, didn't feel sadness. Just distance. Like looking at a photograph from someone else's life, from a person I used to be, but no longer recognized. I fed the entire thing through my shredder and watched it turn to confetti. Work kept moving forward. The promotion came through in early January, just as the new year began. Bigger team. I was now managing 7 people at Riverside Technologies. Bigger responsibilities. Better salary. Corner office with a view of the city. Less noise in my head because my energy wasn't being drained by problems I couldn't fix. I was doing better work than I'd ever done. My boss, Patricia Grayson, pulled me aside after a quarterly review. "Whatever you're doing differently," she said, "keep doing it. You seem more focused, more present, more like the Stephen we hired 4 years ago." I didn't tell her that the difference was absence. The absence of chaos. The absence of someone else's emotional emergencies becoming my responsibility. The absence of trying to fix things that were fundamentally broken. Occasionally, I heard things through the grapevine. Secondhand updates from people who knew Whitney. She'd moved again, left the motel for a shared apartment with 2 roommates she found on Craigslist. Lost that when she couldn't make rent. Went back to her parents' house in Eugene for a while, but that hadn't lasted. Her father, Arthur, was still furious about the money she'd borrowed under false pretenses. Then she'd left again, tried moving to Seattle, came back to Portland. Always trying to recover the life she thought she deserved instead of building one herself. Always looking for someone else to save her instead of saving herself. I didn't reach out. Didn't ask mutual friends for details. Didn't check her social media. I'd blocked her everywhere the day I blocked her number. Not because I hated her. Hate requires energy, requires caring, requires emotional investment. But because I didn't need closure anymore. The story was finished. The book was closed. My life had moved on to entirely different chapters. One night in early March, 6 months after she'd left, I was driving home late from a dinner with colleagues. We'd celebrated closing a major deal, the Westfield account that would set Riverside Technologies up for years. I was driving the new Audi A4 I'd bought myself, the one with the leather seats and the sound system that made music feel like it was surrounding you. The city lights of Portland reflected off the hood, and for a moment I remembered the version of myself who'd thought love meant sacrifice without limits. Who'd thought loyalty meant absorbing someone else's chaos. Who'd thought being a good husband meant working myself to exhaustion to provide a life for someone who was already planning her exit. I smiled, just slightly, at how naive that Stephen had been. That man didn't exist anymore. He'd died the night Whitney asked for space. And someone stronger, clearer, more whole had been born in his place. I parked in my driveway, walked up to my front door, and locked it behind me. Cooper greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, tail wagging, completely present in the moment in the way only dogs can be. The house was quiet in the best possible way. No tension humming beneath the surface. No waiting for the next emotional storm. No wondering if today would be the day everything fell apart again. Just peace. Just calm. Just life. Some people think winning looks like revenge. Like making the other person suffer the way they made you suffer. Like evening the score. Others think it looks like reconciliation. Like forgiveness and second chances and rebuilding what was broken. For me, winning looked like silence. Like stability. Like a life that finally felt like it belonged to me. Like waking up each morning without dread. Like making plans that were mine alone. Like building something that couldn't be destroyed by someone else's choices. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you for watching the video to the end. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. A playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to is now displayed on the screen. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.